The wind howled like a wounded beast through the mountain passes of southern Colorado, carrying with it a fury of snow that could blind a man in seconds. Eli McCrae pulled his worn buffalo coat tighter around his shoulders, squinting through the white chaos that had descended upon the San Juan Mountains. His horse, a sturdy Mustang named Brandy, picked her way carefully through the deepening drifts, her breath coming in great clouds of steam. Eli had lived in these mountains for 7 years now, ever since the war had ended and left him with nothing but nightmares and a desire for solitude. His cabin sat tucked into a sheltered valley 3 miles north, but in this storm, it might as well have been on the moon. He'd been tracking a wounded elk since dawn, but the storm had rolled in fast and fierce, erasing all signs of his quarry. "Easy, girl," he murmured to Brandy as she snorted nervously. The mare's ears swiveled, catching some sound beneath the wind's roar. Eli trusted her instincts more than his own. Horses could sense trouble long before men. That's when he saw them. Tracks in the snow, already half filled but still visible. Horse tracks, wandering and uneven, as if the rider had lost all sense of direction. Eli frowned. No one with sense would be out in weather like this. He followed the trail, which led toward a rocky outcrop where the wind had scoured the snow down to bare stone. The tracks ended abruptly at a steep ravine. Eli's heart sank as he peered over the edge. 20 feet down, a dark shape lay crumpled against the rocks. A horse, its neck bent at an unnatural angle, but there was no rider. He dismounted and tied Brandy to a stunted pine, then began searching the area on foot. The wind tried to knock him sideways with every step. His boots crunched through the crusty snow as he worked his way along the ravine's edge, eyes scanning for any sign of the thrown rider. He almost missed her. A flash of dark fabric against the white caught his eye. A woman's traveling cloak, expensive by the look of it. Though now torn and stained, she lay motionless in a shallow depression, partially sheltered by an overhanging rock. Blood had frozen in a dark streak from a gash on her forehead. Eli dropped to his knees beside her, pulling off his glove to feel for a pulse at her throat. Her skin was cold as marble, but there, faint but steady, he felt the rhythm of life. She was young, maybe 25, with features that spoke of Eastern refinement even in unconsciousness. Dark hair spilled from beneath a ruined bonnet, and her hands, when he checked them for frostbite, were soft and uncalloused. "Ma'am?" He gently shook her shoulder. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" No response. He couldn't leave her here. She'd be dead within the hour. His cabin was closer than town, and in this storm, it was the only option. Eli gathered her into his arms, surprised by how light she felt beneath the heavy, sodden cloak. She stirred slightly, murmuring something he couldn't catch over the wind. Getting her onto Brandy proved challenging. The mare stood steady as a rock while Eli arranged the unconscious woman across the saddle, then swung up behind her. He held her against his chest with one arm while guiding Brandy with the other, praying the horse could find her way home in the whiteout. The journey seemed endless. The woman's head lolled against his shoulder, and more than once he had to check that she was still breathing. By the time his cabin's dark shape loomed through the storm, Eli's arm was numb from holding her, and ice had formed in his beard. He carried her inside and laid her on his narrow bed, then hurried to build up the fire he'd banked that morning. The cabin was simple. One room with a stone fireplace, a few pieces of rough furniture he'd built himself, and his meager possessions. But it was warm and dry, and right now, that was all that mattered. By the yellow light of an oil lamp, Eli examined the woman's injuries. The head wound was ugly, but not deep. Head wounds always bled like the devil. Her ankle was swollen, possibly sprained or broken. Most concerning was her body temperature. He needed to get her warm, and fast, working with the efficiency of a man who'd tended wounded soldiers. Eli removed her wet outer garments, beneath the traveling dress. Her corset and petticoats were damp but not soaked through. He hesitated, then decided propriety was less important than survival. He loosened the corset strings just enough to help her breathe easier and wrapped her in every blanket he owned. The wind rattled the cabin's shutters as Eli cleaned and bandaged her head wound. She had a delicate face, with high cheekbones and full lips that were currently far too pale. A thin scar ran along her jawline, old and faded. Expensive jewelry adorned her throat and fingers, a pearl necklace and several rings that would fetch enough money to live on for a year. Eli built the fire higher and put water on to boil. He made a simple broth from dried venison and wild onions, hoping she might wake enough to take some nourishment. As the storm raged outside, he settled into his chair near the bed to keep watch. She stirred near midnight, a soft moan escaping her lips. Her eyelids fluttered, revealing eyes the color of mountain sage. For a moment, she stared at him without comprehension. Then panic flashed across her features. "Easy now," Eli said softly, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "You're safe. You had an accident in the storm." She tried to sit up, gasped in pain, and fell back against the pillows. Her hand went to her head, finding the bandage. "Where?" Her voice was hoarse, cultured, with a slight eastern accent. "My cabin, about 10 miles south of Redemption Creek. I found you near Dutch Canyon. Your horse." He shook his head. She closed her eyes, and he saw her throat work as she swallowed hard. "Dead?" "Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry." A single tear slipped from beneath her closed lids. When she opened them again, the panic had been replaced by wariness. "You're alone here?" "Yes, ma'am. Name's Eli McCrae." He poured water from a pitcher into a tin cup. "Can you drink something?" She nodded slightly, then winced. He helped her sit up enough to sip the water, noting how her fingers trembled as they wrapped around the cup. Up close, he could see bruising on her wrists, older than today's accident. "What's your name?" he asked when she'd finished drinking. She hesitated, her green eyes studying his face as if trying to read his character in the weathered lines and days-old stubble. "Anna," she said finally. "Anna Smith." It was a lie, clear as day. But Eli had his own secrets, his own reasons for living alone in these mountains. He didn't press. "Well, Miss Smith, you've got a nasty cut on your head and your ankles swelled up something fierce. Storm's not letting up anytime soon, so you'll need to stay put for a while." "I can't," she said quickly, trying again to rise. "I have to—" She broke off with a gasp of pain. "Ma'am, you're not going anywhere in this weather, injured or not. Whatever's chasing you will have to wait." Her eyes widened. "I didn't say anything was chasing me." "Didn't have to." Eli stood and moved to the fire, adding another log. Woman traveling alone in expensive clothes. Giving a false name. Looking over her shoulder even when she can barely sit up. Doesn't take a genius to figure you're running from something or someone. She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Are you going to turn me in?" "To who?" Eli turned back to face her. "I don't know who you are or what you've done, and frankly, I don't care. But I'm not in the habit of throwing injured women out into blizzards, regardless of their troubles." She studied him again, something softening in her expression. "Thank you, Mr. McCrae." "Just Eli." He ladled some broth into a bowl. "Think you can eat something?" She managed a few sips of the broth before exhaustion overtook her again. Eli helped her lie back down, noting how she flinched when he touched her, even though his hands were gentle. "I'll bed down by the fire," he said, gathering a blanket for himself. "You need anything in the night, you call out." "Eli?" Her voice was drowsy now, the warmth and food pulling her toward sleep. "Why do you live out here alone?" He paused at the question, his back to her. "Same reason you're using a false name. I reckon sometimes the world gets too loud, and a person needs some quiet." He heard her shift in the bed, the ropes creaking slightly. "Yes," she murmured. "Sometimes it does." The storm continued through the night. Eli dozed fitfully in his chair, waking every hour to tend the fire and check on his unexpected guest. "Once?" she cried out in her sleep. Words he couldn't understand mixed with sobs. He almost went to her but decided against it. Whatever demons haunted her dreams were hers to face. Dawn came slowly, the light filtering gray and weak through the shuttered windows. The wind had died to a whisper, and when Eli peered outside, he saw the snow had stopped. 3 feet of fresh powder blanketed everything, turning the familiar landscape into something foreign and pristine. Anna woke as he was making coffee, the rich smell filling the small cabin. She struggled to sit up, her face pale but determined. "How do you feel?" Eli asked, pouring 2 cups of the bitter brew. "Like I fell off a horse in a blizzard," she said with a weak attempt at humor. She accepted the coffee gratefully, wrapping both hands around the warm tin cup. In the morning light, he could see her more clearly. Despite the bandage and bruises, she was beautiful in a refined way that seemed out of place in his rough cabin. Her traveling dress, now dried by the fire, was indeed expensive, silk and wool, with intricate embroidery. Whatever she was running from, she came from money. "I should go," she said, though she made no move to stand. "I've imposed enough." "Look outside," Eli suggested. She turned to the window, seeing the wall of white. Her shoulders sagged. "Oh, even if you were healthy enough to travel, which you're not, you wouldn't make it a mile in that snow. The passes will be blocked for days, maybe a week." "A week?" The panic was back in her voice. "Maybe longer. This is just the start of winter up here. Storms like this can chain together, one after another." He sipped his coffee, watching her over the rim. "Whatever you're running from, you've got some time to figure out your next move." She was quiet for a long moment, staring into her coffee as if it might hold answers. What if they come looking? Then they'll have to get through the same snow you'd have to, and if they somehow manage that. "Well," Eli's hand moved unconsciously to the Colt revolver on his hip. "I've dealt with unwelcome visitors before." Something in his tone must have reassured her, because she relaxed slightly. "I don't have money to pay you. My purse was on my horse. Didn't ask for any. But surely, Miss Smith, or whatever your real name is, I didn't pull you out of that storm expecting payment. You need help, and I'm in a position to give it. That's all." She looked at him then, really looked at him, as if seeing him for the first time. Eli knew what she saw, a man in his 30s, worn down by weather and solitude, with hands scarred from work and fighting, eyes that had seen too much. Not the kind of man a woman like her would normally associate with. "Why?" she asked softly. He shrugged, uncomfortable with the scrutiny. "Maybe because I know what it's like to need a place to hide. Maybe because I'm just a fool who can't leave well enough alone. Does it matter?" "Yes," she said firmly. "It matters." They stared at each other across the small space, the fire crackling between them. Outside, the wind picked up again, rattling the shutters with renewed vigor. "Finally," she spoke again. "My name is Arabella Fontaine, and if they find me, they'll kill us both." The days that followed blurred together like watercolors in the rain. Arabella's recovery was slow but steady, marked by small victories, sitting up without dizziness, taking a few tentative steps on her injured ankle, managing to eat solid food. Eli watched it all with the patient attention of a man who had nowhere else to be. On the 4th morning, she insisted on helping with the chores despite his protests. He found her attempting to split kindling with his small hatchet, her fine hands already blistering from the unfamiliar work. "You'll ruin your hands," he said, gently taking the hatchet from her. "They're already ruined," she replied, showing him her palms. Old scars crossed the newer blisters. Burns. He realized. "I'm not as helpless as I appear, Mr. McCrae. Just Eli," he reminded her. "And I never said you were helpless, but there's no sense in making your injuries worse." She watched him split the wood with practiced ease, each strike of the axe precise and economical. "Teach me," she said suddenly. "If I'm to stay here, I should contribute." So he taught her how to position the wood, how to let the weight of the axe do the work, how to read the grain. Her first attempts were clumsy, but she was a quick learner, and by afternoon she'd managed to split several small logs on her own. "Where did you get those scars?" he asked that evening as she soaked her blistered hands in warm water and salt. Arabella was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. My father owned several banks in New York. When I was 16, there was a fire in our home. Started in the kitchen. They said I tried to get to my sister's room. She trailed off, staring at her hands in the basin. I couldn't reach her in time. I'm sorry, Eli said, understanding now the weight she carried. It wasn't your fault, she said with a bitter smile, though I sometimes wonder whose fault it really was. The fire was ruled an accident, but… She shook her head. It doesn't matter now. That night, Eli was awakened by her screams. He found her tangled in the blankets, calling out a name. Margaret, Margaret, please! He touched her shoulder gently, speaking her name until she woke with a gasp. Just a dream, he said softly. You're safe. She was trembling, sweat beading her forehead despite the cold. Without thinking, Eli sat on the edge of the bed and pulled her against his chest. She stiffened for a moment, then collapsed against him, sobbing. She was only 12, she whispered against his shirt. She was scared of the dark, always had to have a candle burning. I should have checked on her sooner. I should have… Hush now, Eli murmured, his hand moving in slow circles on her back. Can't change what's done. All we can do is carry it and keep moving forward. She pulled back to look at him, her green eyes luminous with tears. Is that what you do? Carry it? Every day? He admitted. Gets a little easier with time, but it never goes away completely. What do you carry? Eli McCrae? He was quiet for a moment, debating. Then, surprising himself, he answered, The faces of men I killed in the war. Boys, really, some younger than your sister. Confederate and Union both, in the end. They all looked the same when they were dying. Arabella reached up and touched his face, her fingers whisper soft against his weathered cheek. We're quite a pair, aren't we? Two souls haunted by ghosts. The moment stretched between them, charged with something Eli didn't want to name. He cleared his throat and stood. You should try to get some more sleep. I'll sit up for a while. But sleep eluded them both. They ended up talking until dawn, sharing pieces of their stories like trading cards. Arabella told him about growing up in New York society, the endless parties and social obligations that felt like a beautifully decorated prison. About her father, Charles Fontaine, whose charm masked a cruel streak that emerged behind closed doors. After Margaret died, he blamed me, she said, staring into the dying fire. Said I was careless, that I'd brought shame on the family name. He started making plans for my future without consulting me. Said I owed him for the embarrassment. The marriage, Eli guessed. She nodded. Judge Theodore Blackwood, 53 years old, with a reputation for… She paused, choosing her words carefully. Let's say his previous two wives both died under mysterious circumstances, but he had political connections my father needed, and money to cover some questionable business dealings. Eli felt anger rise in his chest. So you ran. 2 weeks before the wedding, I took what money I could, some jewelry to sell, and caught the first train west. I've been running for 3 months now. She laughed bitterly. I thought I could disappear out here, become someone new, but they found me in Denver, then Colorado Springs. That's why I was traveling in the storm. I couldn't wait for better weather. This judge, he's the one who'll kill you. Him or his men, he can't afford to let me live. I know too much about his business dealings, things I overheard when he thought I wasn't listening. And my father… She wrapped her arms around herself. My father would rather see me dead than have me disgrace the family name further. The next days brought a routine of sorts. Arabella proved herself surprisingly adaptable, learning to cook simple meals over the fire, mend clothes with rough stitches, even help with the heavier chores as her ankle healed. Eli found himself looking forward to their evening conversations, to the way she laughed when he told stories about his horse Brandy's stubborn streak, to the comfortable silences that fell between them. One evening, as snow began to fall again, Arabella produced a small wooden box from her traveling cloak. I should have shown you this sooner, she said, placing it on the table between them. Inside were papers, ledgers, correspondence, legal documents. Eli couldn't make sense of most of it, but Arabella explained, proof of my father's embezzlement. He's been stealing from his own banks for years, using Judge Blackwood to cover it up through the courts. When the scandal broke, he made it appear that I was the one who'd been siphoning funds. That's the official story. That I stole a fortune and fled. But these papers prove otherwise? Yes, I took them from his safe the night I left. I thought maybe I could use them to bargain for my freedom, but... She closed the box. Who would believe me? A runaway bride accused of theft against two pillars of New York society? Eli studied her face in the lamplight. Why didn't you tell me this before? Would you have believed me? Would you have still helped me, knowing you were harboring an accused thief? Yes, he said without hesitation, surprising them both. The tension that had been building between them for days finally reached a breaking point. They were arguing about something trivial, whether she should attempt to go to town for supplies once the weather cleared. Eli was insisting it was too dangerous. She was tired of hiding like a frightened rabbit. I'm not your prisoner, she snapped, color high in her cheeks. I've been taking care of myself for months before you found me. And look how well that turned out, he shot back, nearly frozen to death at the bottom of a ravine. Better than slowly dying in this cabin, afraid of my own shadow. You think I like seeing you afraid? The words burst out of him, louder than he intended. You think I enjoy watching you jump at every sound, seeing the nightmares tear you apart? If I could take that fear from you, I would. If I could face down every man hunting you. Why? She demanded, stepping closer to him. Why do you care what happens to me? I'm nothing to you. Just some Eastern woman who stumbled into your life and brought nothing but trouble. You're not nothing, he said, his voice rough. Don't you understand? She kissed him. It was desperate and fierce, born of fear and longing and too many nights of wanting what they couldn't have. Eli froze for a heartbeat. Then his arms came around her, pulling her against him as he deepened the kiss. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Arabella's eyes were wide, her lips swollen. I'm sorry, she whispered. I shouldn't have. He silenced her with another kiss, gentler this time. When he pulled back, he rested his forehead against hers. Don't apologize. Just don't ask me to stand by and watch you put yourself in danger. I can't stay here forever. Eli, they'll find me eventually. Then we'll face them together, he said, the words a vow. You're not alone anymore, Arabella. Not if I have anything to say about it. Later, as the fire burned low and the snow continued to fall, they came together again. This time it was slower, deliberate, a conscious choice rather than an impulsive act. Eli carried her to the bed, his hands gentle despite their calluses. They undressed each other with careful attention, mapping scars and stories with fingertips and lips. When they joined together, it was with a desperate tenderness, as if they could hold back the world through sheer force of will. Arabella whispered his name like a prayer, and Eli buried his face in her hair, breathing in the scent of her, soap and snow and something uniquely hers. Afterward, they lay entwined, skin cooling in the cold air. Arabella traced patterns on Eli's chest, her fingers finding old bullet scars and newer cuts from hard living. What happens now? She asked quietly. I don't know, he admitted, pressing a kiss to her forehead. But whatever comes, we'll face it together. You can't promise that. You don't know what they're capable of. I know what I'm capable of, he said, his voice taking on an edge she hadn't heard before. And I promise you this, anyone who wants to hurt you will have to go through me first. She was quiet for a long moment, then spoke so softly he almost missed it. I think I'm falling in love with you, Eli McCrae. He tightened his arms around her. Already fell. He murmured against her hair. The moment I saw you lying in that snow, looking like an angel that had fallen from heaven. A very battered angel, she said with a weak laugh. My kind of angel, he replied, meaning it. Outside, the storm continued its assault on the mountains, but inside the small cabin, two wounded souls found warmth in each other's arms. For now, that was enough. The snow had finally stopped after 10 days, leaving the world crystalline and deceptively peaceful. Eli saddled Brandy in the pale morning light while Arabella watched from the cabin doorway, wrapped in one of his old coats. "We need supplies," he said, checking the saddle's cinch. "Won't be gone more than a few hours." "I should come with you," she said, though they both knew her ankle wasn't ready for the journey to Redemption Creek. "Too risky. Your face might be on wanted posters by now." He swung up into the saddle, then leaned down to cup her cheek. "Bar the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone." The ride to town took longer than usual, with Brandy picking her way through chest-deep drifts. Eli's mind kept wandering back to the cabin, to Arabella. The past days had been like living in a dream, cooking together, sharing stories by the fire, making love with a passion that surprised them both. But dreams had a way of ending badly in his experience. Redemption Creek was bustling despite the recent storm. Miners, ranchers, and townspeople crowded the muddy streets, everyone eager to resupply after being snowed in. Eli tied Brandy outside Coleman's general store and pushed through the door, making mental notes of what they needed: flour, coffee, salt pork, ammunition. "Eli McCrae." Tom Coleman's voice boomed from behind the counter. "Thought maybe you'd frozen solid up in them mountains." "Takes more than a little snow to kill me off," Eli replied, setting items on the counter. "How's Martha?" "Ornery as ever. Say, you hear about the excitement? Some fancy Eastern lady went missing. There's men in town offering good money for information." Eli's hand stilled on a bag of beans. "That's so? $500. They're saying, woman named Fontaine. Supposed to be a thief, though she don't look the type from the poster." Tom jerked his thumb toward the wall where a printed notice hung among other wanted bills. Eli forced himself to walk casually to the wall. The sketch was a good likeness, Arabella's delicate features rendered in black ink, though it failed to capture the fire in her eyes or the way her mouth curved when she smiled. "Wanted for theft and fraud," blazed across the top. "Arabella Fontaine, $500 reward, possibly dangerous." Dangerous," Eli muttered. "Right. What's that?" Tom called. "Nothing. Just add some medical supplies to my order. Bandages. Laudanum if you've got it." Tom's eyes sharpened. "You hurt up there. Horse threw me in the storm." Eli lied smoothly. "Nothing serious." He was loading his purchases when a commotion erupted near the saloon. Two men in city clothes were questioning Jake Martinez, one of them holding him by the shirt front, even from across the street. Eli could hear their raised voices. "Saw her. I know you did. Woman riding alone, dark hair, green eyes." Eli's hand moved to his Colt as he walked closer, keeping to the shadows of the buildings. The men were strangers, but their type was familiar enough. Hired guns dressed up as gentlemen, the kind Judge Blackwood would employ. "I told you, I ain't seen nobody." Jake protested. "Let go of me." The larger man shoved Jake into the mud. "We'll be watching. Mexican." "You see her. You better speak up, or things will go badly for you and yours." Eli memorized their faces, the large one with scarred knuckles and mean eyes, the smaller one with a sharp face like a ferret. They moved on to terrorize someone else, and Eli helped Jake to his feet. "Thanks," Jake muttered, brushing mud from his clothes. "Pendejos. They been here long?" 2 days. More coming, they say. Whatever that woman did, someone wants her bad." Eli bought Jake a drink to steady his nerves, then headed back to the cabin, pushing Brandy harder than was safe on the treacherous trails. The peaceful days were over. The world had found them. Arabella must have been watching from the window because she had the door open before he dismounted. Her face was pale but composed as she helped him unload the supplies. "They're in town," he said without preamble. "Your poster's on the wall at Coleman's. 2 of Blackwood's men, maybe more coming." She sank into a chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "How long do we have?" "Few days, maybe a week if we're lucky. They're questioning everyone, but folks around here don't much care for outsiders pushing them around." "I should leave tonight. I've brought enough trouble." Stop. Eli knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. We've been through this. You're not running alone anymore. Eli, there's an old miner's shack about 5 miles up the mountain, he continued. Abandoned but solid. We could hole up there until they move on. And if they don't move on, he was quiet for a moment. Then we make for the desert. I know trails through Arizona territory that no Eastern hired gun could follow. We could make it to Mexico if we had to. She searched his face. You'd do that? Leave everything behind for me? What everything? He gestured around the sparse cabin. This place has been a hiding spot, not a home. Maybe it's time I stopped hiding too. That night, they began preparing to leave. Eli cleaned and loaded every weapon he owned while Arabella sorted through their supplies, packing only essentials. The wooden box of evidence went into an oilcloth wrap to protect it from the elements. Tell me about the desert, she said as they worked. Is it really as harsh as they say? Harsher, Eli admitted. Hot enough to cook a man during the day, cold enough to freeze him at night. Water's scarce, and what you find might kill you quicker than thirst. But it's beautiful too, in its way. Colors at sunset you wouldn't believe. Stars so bright you could read by them. And we could start over there. Build a life? People have done it with less reason than we've got. She moved to stand behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist. I don't deserve you. Eli McCrae. He turned in her embrace, tilting her chin up. Don't ever say that again. We deserve whatever happiness we can carve out of this world. They made love that night with a fierce urgency, knowing it might be their last peaceful moment for a long while. Every touch was memorized, every whispered endearment, a promise against an uncertain future. Near dawn. Eli woke to find Arabella gone from the bed. Panic shot through him until he saw her silhouette by the window, wrapped in a blanket. Couldn't sleep, he asked, joining her. I was thinking about Margaret, she said softly. How she always said I was too stubborn for my own good. She'd probably laugh to see me now, the proper lady learning to split wood and shoot a rifle. She'd be proud, Eli said. You've survived things that would break most people. I haven't survived yet. She leaned into him. Eli, if something happens, nothing's going to happen. Listen to me. She turned to face him, her expression fierce. If it comes to a choice between your life and mine, you have to promise, no. His voice was flat, final. Don't ask that of me. These aren't just hired thugs. Eli, Blackwood has connections, influence. He can... A sound outside made them both freeze. Horses, moving carefully through the snow. Eli pushed Arabella toward the corner where his rifle stood, then peered through a crack in the shutters. 3 riders, moving slowly up the trail. Even in the pre-dawn darkness, he could make out the city cut of their clothes. Get dressed, he whispered urgently. Grab the essentials. We're leaving now. They moved with practiced efficiency, throwing on clothes and gathering their packed supplies. Eli saddled Brandy while Arabella wrapped the wooden box and tucked it inside her coat. The riders were closer now, perhaps 200 yards down the trail. Eli lifted Arabella onto the horse, then swung up behind her. The shack, she whispered. No, they might know about it. There's another place. Hang on. He urged Brandy up a narrow deer trail that wound behind the cabin. The mare picked her way carefully in the darkness, every step seeming too loud in the morning stillness. Behind them, Eli heard voices. The men had reached the cabin. A shout went up as they discovered it empty. Then lantern light bloomed, and Eli knew they were searching for tracks. He urged Brandy faster, branches tearing at their clothes as they pushed through the thick pine forest. There! A voice called from below. Fresh tracks heading up! A shot cracked through the air, the bullet whining past their heads. Arabella flinched but didn't cry out. Eli drew his Colt and fired back, not aiming to hit but to make them cautious. They burst out of the trees onto a rocky ridge. The sky was lightening in the east, painting the snow-covered peaks in shades of rose and gold. Beautiful and treacherous, One wrong step would send them plummeting into the canyon below. "Trust me," Eli murmured, guiding Brandy along a ledge barely wide enough for the horse. More shots echoed behind them, but the pursuing riders had to slow on the dangerous trail. They descended into a narrow valley where ancient petroglyphs marked the stone walls. Eli had found this place years ago, a box canyon with only one way in or out, but with caves that went deep into the mountain. "End of the line," Arabella said, seeing the sheer walls surrounding them. "Beginning of the line," Eli corrected, dismounting and helping her down. "Can you lead Brandy to that overhang? I'll be right behind you." She looked at him, understanding dawning. "Eli, no, go." He kissed her hard, then turned back toward the canyon entrance, checking his ammunition. The first rider appeared, silhouetted against the morning sky. Eli's shot took him from the saddle before he could raise an alarm. The second man was smarter, dismounting and taking cover behind a boulder. "McCrae!" The voice echoed off the canyon walls. "We know you're in there. Send the woman out, and we'll let you live." "Counteroffer," Eli called back. "You turn around now, and I won't feed you to the coyotes." A laugh, harsh and unpleasant. "3 of us, 1 of you, and more coming. You can't win this. Don't have to win. Just have to make sure you lose." The standoff stretched taut as a bowstring. Then Arabella's voice rang out from behind him. "I'll come out. Just don't hurt him." "No!" Eli roared. But she was already walking toward him, her hands raised. The wooden box was visible inside her partially opened coat. "That's it, Miss Fontaine," the voice called. "Nice and easy now." She reached Eli's position and pressed something into his hand, a derringer. "Small and deadly. Together," she whispered. The third man had circled around, trying to flank them. He emerged from behind a rock formation, rifle raised. Eli spun and fired the derringer, catching him in the shoulder. The man's shot went wide, but it spooked the horses. In the chaos that followed, whinnying horses, shouting men, gunshots echoing like thunder, Eli and Arabella fought with desperate fury. She had his spare pistol, firing with surprising accuracy. The man Eli had wounded tried to rush them. Arabella's shot dropped him 3 feet away. The remaining attacker, the ferret-faced one from town, had taken cover in the rocks. "You're only making it worse," he screamed. "Judge Blackwood will burn the whole territory to find you." "Let him try," Eli growled. He'd been counting shots. The man had to be nearly empty. "Arabella, when I move, you run for the caves. Not without you. Damn stubborn woman." But he said it with fierce pride. A new sound made them all freeze. Horses, lots of them, thundering up the trail. Eli's heart sank. Reinforcements. Then a familiar voice boomed out. "Eli McCrae, you in there? You ornery cuss?" Jake Martinez, along with 6 riders from Redemption Creek. Tom Coleman, the sheriff, Ben Cooper, even the minister. Men who'd had enough of outsiders pushing them around? The ferret-faced man tried to run. Sheriff Cooper's lasso dropped him neat as you please. "Heard you might need some help," Jake called, grinning. These city boys been making themselves real unpopular in town. It was over that fast. The surviving attacker was tied across his horse, ready for a ride back to town and a talk with Sheriff Cooper about threatening honest citizens. The dead would be buried without markers. "This ain't finished," the captured man snarled. "Judge Blackwood has reach you can't imagine. You'll never be safe." "Then I guess we'd better keep moving," Eli said calmly. He looked at the assembled townsmen, these rough frontier folk who'd chosen justice over easy money. "We're grateful, but we can't stay. You understand?" Tom Coleman nodded. "Trail to Arizona territory's clear. Last I heard, might find what you're looking for down that way." Sheriff Cooper studied Arabella, then deliberately turned his back. "Funny thing, I can't seem to recall what the woman on that poster looked like. Must be getting old." One by one, the others did the same, giving Eli and Arabella the gift of invisibility. As the sun climbed higher, painting the canyon walls gold, Eli helped Arabella back onto Brandy. The wooden box was safe. Their enemies were scattered, and the trail south beckoned. "Ready?" he asked. swinging up behind her. She leaned back against his chest, her hand covering his on the reins. Ready. They rode out of the canyon together, leaving the past behind with the morning shadows. Ahead lay the desert, vast and unforgiving, but also full of possibility. Whatever came next, they would face it as they had faced this, together. The last thing Eli heard as they crested the ridge was Jake Martinez's voice carrying on the wind. Vaya con Dios, amigos. Go with God, friends. They intended to. The desert stretched before them like a vast ocean of sand and stone, shimmering in the heat waves that rose from the baked earth. They'd been traveling for 5 days since leaving Colorado, following ancient trails that wound between towering saguaro cacti and through valleys where nothing grew but thorny ocotillo and stubborn creosote. Eli had traded Brandy for 2 sturdy desert horses and supplies in the last settlement they'd passed, a nameless collection of adobes that barely qualified as a town. The mare wasn't built for this terrain, and sentiment couldn't override survival. How much water do we have left? Arabella asked from beneath the wide-brimmed hat he'd bought her. Her fair skin had burned despite their efforts, peeling across her nose and cheeks. 2 days, maybe 3 if we're careful. Eli squinted at the horizon, reading the landscape like others might read a book. There's a spring near Skeleton Ridge. We'll reach it by nightfall. They rode in companionable silence, saving their energy. The desert had a way of stripping things down to essentials. Water, shade, survival. Everything else fell away like unnecessary weight. As the sun began its descent, painting the rocks in shades of copper and gold, they made camp in the lee of a massive boulder. Eli tended the horses while Arabella gathered what little firewood she could find, mostly dried cholla skeletons and weathered mesquite. I never imagined anywhere could be so empty, she said, settling beside him as stars began to emerge in the darkening sky. It's beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The desert doesn't lie, Eli said, passing her the water skin. It shows you exactly what it is. No pretense, no mercy. You respect it or it kills you. She was quiet for a moment, then spoke softly. Rather like us, then. No more pretense, no more lies. That night, she finally told him everything. About finding evidence of her father's embezzlement years ago, but keeping quiet to protect the family name. About Margaret discovering the truth and threatening to go to the authorities. Father couldn't have that, Arabella said, her voice hollow. A week later, there was the fire. They said Margaret had knocked over a candle in her room, but I knew better. The door to her room, it had been locked from the outside. Eli pulled her close as she wept, her tears precious water in this dry land. And you've been carrying this alone all these years? Who would have believed me? Father is, a pillar of society. When I finally worked up the courage to confront him, that's when he arranged the marriage to Blackwood. Said it was that or he'd have me committed to an asylum for hysteria and delusions. The evidence in that box proves the embezzlement. Yes, but Margaret's murder? She shook her head. That secret died with the servants he paid off. All I have is my certainty and my guilt. They made love under the infinite stars, gentle and slow, an affirmation of life in the face of so much death. Afterward, Eli held her as she slept, keeping watch against the dangers that prowled the night, both animal and human. The spring at Skeleton Ridge was nearly dry, barely a trickle seeping from the rocks. They filled their water skins carefully, straining the liquid through cloth to remove the worst of the sediment. As Eli worked, Arabella climbed higher on the ridge, using the vantage point to scan their back trail. Riders, she called down, her voice tight. Maybe 5 miles back. Eli cursed under his breath. They'd been careful, but in the desert, dust plumes could be seen for miles. He scrambled up to join her, studying the distant figures through a small spyglass. 4 men, he confirmed. Moving steady, but not pushing hard. They know we can't run far in this heat. Blackwood's men? Most likely. Or bounty hunters who got word. He collapsed the spyglass. We need to move. Now! They pushed the horses harder than was safe. Angling southwest toward a maze of canyons Eli remembered from his scouting days. The sun climbed higher, turning the air into a furnace. Both horses were lathered with sweat, their breathing labored. By midday, they were deep in the canyon system, navigating narrow passages where the walls rose 100 feet on either side. Eli called a halt in a wider section where a lone cottonwood provided meager shade. "The horses need rest," he said, though he kept glancing back the way they'd come. "We can't run them to death." Arabella slid from her saddle, her legs unsteady. The heat and constant riding were taking their toll. Her lips were cracked despite the salve he'd bought, and her hands trembled as she loosened her horse's girth. "How do they keep finding us?" she asked wearily. "Money talks loud in poor country. Someone always needs it bad enough to sell information." Eli studied the canyon walls, his mind racing through possibilities. "But these canyons are our advantage. They don't know the land like I do." A shot echoed through the canyon, the sound multiplied and distorted by the rock walls. Their pursuers had found the entrance. "Can you shoot while riding?" Eli asked, handing her his spare revolver. "I'm about to learn," she replied with grim determination. They mounted up and plunged deeper into the maze. The canyon twisted and turned, sometimes opening into wider spaces, other times narrowing so much they had to ride single file. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew closer. At a fork in the canyon, Eli made a quick decision. "This way," he said, guiding them left into what looked like a dead end. "Eli, trust me." The passage narrowed until the horses could barely fit, then suddenly opened into a hidden valley. Ancient ruins dotted the cliff faces, dwelling places of people long vanished. A small spring fed a pool of green water, and desert willows provided blessed shade. "The Hohokam built these," Eli explained as they watered the horses. "People forget they're here. We can defend this place if we have to." They didn't have long to wait. The pursuers found the hidden entrance just as the sun was beginning its western descent. Eli positioned himself behind a fallen wall, rifle ready, while Arabella took cover higher up with extra ammunition. "McCrae," a voice called out. "We know you're in here. Make this easy on everyone. Send out the woman and the papers, and you can ride away." "Interesting offer." Eli called back. "Here's mine. You turn around now, and I won't have to explain to your mothers how you died." Harsh laughter echoed off the ancient walls. "4 of us, 2 of you. And the woman's probably never killed a man. I like our odds." Arabella's shot took the hat off the speaker's head, close enough to part his hair. "Want to bet your life on that assumption?" she called down. The resulting gunfight was fierce but brief. The narrow entrance worked in Eli and Arabella's favor. The attackers could only come 1 or 2 at a time. The first man who tried to rush their position fell to Eli's rifle. The second took cover as Arabella's shots chipped rock near his head. "Flank them," someone shouted. "Williams, climb the wall." Eli saw the man attempting to scale the cliff face and adjusted his aim. The shot was difficult, long range, moving target, but years of practice paid off. Williams fell with a cry, clutching his leg. "That's 2 down," Eli announced. "Want to try for 3? The remaining attackers pulled back to reconsider. In the lull, Eli heard Arabella moving, repositioning herself among the ruins. Smart girl, never stay in one place too long. As shadows lengthened, turning the canyon into a maze of darkness and light, one of the attackers tried a different approach. "Miss Fontaine, your father sent a message. He's willing to forgive everything if you just come home. No questions asked, no punishment. Just return what you took." Arabella laughed, bitter and sharp. "My father's forgiveness? He forgave Margaret too, right before she died. Tell him I'd rather take my chances with the Scorpions. Have it your way. But know this, Judge Blackwood has upped the bounty. $10,000. Every gun in the territory will be looking for you. Then they'll have to get past me first." Eli growled. Night fell like a curtain. Eli knew the attackers wouldn't risk an assault in full darkness. Too easy to get lost in the ruins or fall from the cliff faces. But come dawn, they'd try again. He found Arabella in one of the ancient rooms, her back against the wall. the revolver steady in her hands. "We can't stay here," she said quietly. "They'll just wait us out or bring more men." "I know." He sat beside her, their shoulders touching. "There's another way out, a narrow cleft at the back of the valley. We can leave the horses, take only what we can carry on foot." "Where would we go?" "There's a mission 2 days' walk south, San Xavier del Bac. The priests there don't ask questions, and they don't turn anyone away." She was silent for a long moment. "I'm tired of running. Eli, tired of looking over my shoulder, tired of bringing death to everyone around me." "Hey." He turned her face toward him, though he could barely see her features in the darkness. "You didn't bring death. You brought life. You reminded me what it was like to care about something beyond my own survival." "I love you," she whispered. "Whatever happens, I need you to know that. Nothing's going to happen," he said firmly. "We're going to slip out of here, reach the mission, and find a way to use those papers to buy our freedom. Maybe we can't bring your sister justice, but we can stop your father and Blackwood from hurting anyone else." They prepared through the night, filling every container with water from the spring, packing only essential supplies and the precious wooden box. As the eastern sky began to lighten, they made their way to the hidden cleft Eli had mentioned. It was barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through sideways, and it went on for nearly 100 yards through the living rock. Arabella went first, Eli following, both trying to move silently despite the scrape of cloth on stone. They emerged on the far side of the ridge just as the sun broke the horizon. The desert stretched before them again, but now they were on foot, vulnerable, with miles to cover before they reached safety. "Ready?" Eli asked, adjusting the pack on his shoulders. Arabella squared her shoulders, her face set with determination despite the exhaustion written in every line. "Lead the way." They set off into the rising sun, two small figures against the vastness of the desert. Behind them, shouts of anger echoed from the canyon as their escape was discovered, but Eli knew the pursuers would have to backtrack miles to bring their horses around, buying them precious time. The desert tested them through that long day, the sun a merciless hammer, the ground burning through their boot soles, every step an effort. They shared water sparingly, rested in what little shade they could find, and kept moving despite the protests of their bodies. As afternoon wore toward evening, Arabella stumbled and would have fallen if Eli hadn't caught her. Her face was flushed with heat, her breathing shallow. "Just a little further," he urged. "See that ridge? There's shade on the other side, and we can rest." "Liar," she mumbled, but she kept walking, leaning heavily on his arm. They made it to the ridge as the sun touched the western horizon. In the distance, like a mirage made real, the white walls of the mission caught the dying light. One more day. They just had to survive one more day. That night, huddled together in a shallow cave, they allowed themselves to hope. The wooden box sat between them, its contents representing both their doom and their salvation. "When this is over," Arabella said, her head on Eli's shoulder. "What then?" "Then we live," he said simply. "Find a place where no one knows our names. Build something real, maybe raise horses or cattle. Have children who never have to run from anything." "Children," she repeated softly, and he felt her hand move to her belly in an unconscious gesture that made his heart skip. "Arabella, I wasn't sure," she whispered, "but I've missed my monthly time, and the sickness in the mornings." "Eli, I think I'm carrying your child." He pulled her tight against him, emotions warring in his chest, joy, terror, fierce protectiveness. "Then we definitely have to make it through this. Our child deserves better than a life on the run." "Our child," she repeated, and for the first time in days, her smile reached her eyes. As they drifted toward sleep, Eli kept one hand on his rifle and the other on Arabella. Tomorrow they would reach the mission. Tomorrow they would find a way to fight back against the forces hunting them. But tonight, under the vast desert sky, they were just a man and woman in love, protecting the new life growing between them, holding fast to hope despite all the odds stacked against them. The desert had stripped them down to their essence, burned away all pretense. What remained was stronger than fear, more enduring than the stone around them. What remained was love, and the iron determination to survive for each other and the future they carried. The mission bells of San Xavier del Bac rang out across the desert, their bronze voices carrying on the morning air. Arabella stood in the courtyard, watching the Tohono O'odham women weaving baskets in the shade of the arcade. 3 weeks had passed since she and Eli had stumbled through the mission gates, more dead than alive from their desert crossing. Father Francisco had asked no questions, simply offering them sanctuary and care. But Arabella knew their time here was running short. The peaceful interlude couldn't last, not with Blackwood's money turning every bounty hunter in the territory into a bloodhound. "You're troubled, my child," the old priest said, joining her on the wooden bench. "I need to go back," she said quietly. "To Tucson. There's a federal marshal there, James Morrison. He has a reputation for honesty." "And you trust this reputation?" "I trust that he hates corruption more than he loves money." She touched the wooden box beside her, never far from reach. "These papers, they're not just about my father's theft. They implicate 3 judges, a territorial governor, and half the banking commission. Morrison would make his career bringing them down." "And Senor Eli, what does he say?" Arabella's hand moved unconsciously to her belly, where the new life grew stronger each day. "He doesn't know I'm planning this. He's out helping your vaqueros round up cattle. If he knew, he would try to stop you," Father Francisco finished, "or insist on going with you, which is why I have to go alone. In town, I'm just another woman visiting the market. Eli would be recognized immediately." The priest studied her with ancient, knowing eyes. "You carry his child." It wasn't a question, but Arabella nodded. "All the more reason to end this now. I won't raise my baby in fear." That evening, as Eli returned dusty and tired from the cattle work, Arabella met him with fresh water and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. He noticed immediately, after their time together. He could read her moods like changes in the weather. "What is it?" he asked, catching her hands. "Nothing. I'm just tired. The heat." He pulled her close, and she breathed in his familiar scent, leather and sage and something uniquely him. "Arabella, talk to me." She almost broke then, almost told him everything. Instead, she kissed him with desperate passion, pulling him toward their small room. They made love with an intensity that left them both breathless, as if she could somehow store up enough of him to last through what was coming. Later, as he slept beside her, she memorized his face in the moonlight, the scar through his left eyebrow from a long-ago fight, the way his mouth softened in sleep, the steady rise and fall of his chest. Then she carefully extracted herself from his arms, dressed in the simple clothes of a local woman, and slipped out into the night. She left him a letter, placed where he'd find it at dawn. "My beloved Eli, by the time you read this, I'll be in Tucson. Please don't follow, not out of anger, but out of love. This is something I must do alone. I go to Federal Marshal Morrison with the evidence. If he's the man they say he is, this nightmare will finally end. If not, know that I loved you more than life itself. Take care of our child if something happens to me. Tell them their mother was brave, even if she was foolish. All my love." Arabella, the ride to Tucson took most of the night. She'd borrowed a mission horse, promising herself she'd see it returned. The wooden box was wrapped in oilcloth and hidden beneath her serape. Every shadow could hide an enemy. Every sound might herald disaster. Dawn was breaking as she reached the outskirts of Tucson, the adobe buildings glowing pink in the early light. The town was already stirring, merchants opening shops, women drawing water from wells, children driving goats through the dusty streets. The federal marshal's office stood on Main Street, a solid building with barred windows and an American flag hanging limp in the still air. Arabella tied her horse at the rail and climbed the steps, her heart hammering. The outer office was empty except for a young deputy dozing at his desk. He startled awake as she entered. "Help you, ma'am. I need to see Marshal Morrison." It's urgent. Marshall's not in yet. Come back in an hour. Then I'll wait. She sat on the hard wooden bench, clutching her bundle. The deputy eyed her suspiciously, but said nothing more. The minutes crawled by. Through the window, Arabella watched the town come fully awake. Somewhere out there, Blackwood's men might already be searching. Finally, boots on the boardwalk announced the marshal's arrival. James Morrison was a tall man in his 50s, with silver hair and sharp gray eyes that missed nothing. He took in Arabella's presence with one sweep of his gaze. "Ma'am," he said, touching his hat. "Early for a social call." "This isn't social, Marshal." She stood, squaring her shoulders. "I'm Arabella Fontaine, and I have evidence of corruption that reaches to the highest levels of the territorial government." Morrison's expression didn't change, but she saw his hand move casually toward his sidearm. "Miss Fontaine, you're wanted for theft and fraud in New York, falsely accused by the very men whose crimes I can prove." She held out the wrapped box. "Everything's in here: bank records, correspondence, proof of bribery and embezzlement. My father, Judge Blackwood, and their associates have stolen millions." "That's quite an accusation." "It's not an accusation, it's fact, and I'm willing to testify to all of it, including my father's role in my sister's death." Now, Morrison's expression did change, sharpening with interest. "You'd testify against your own father?" "He stopped being my father the night he had Margaret killed." Her voice was steady, despite the pain. "Will you look at the evidence, Marshal?" "That's all I ask." Morrison studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Come into my office, Deputy. No visitors for the next hour." The inner office was sparse but clean, with a large desk and a safe in the corner. Morrison gestured for her to sit, then carefully unwrapped the box she handed him. For the next 40 minutes, he examined the papers in silence, occasionally making notes or asking brief questions. Arabella watched his face, seeing his expression grow progressively grimmer. Finally, he leaned back in his chair. "If even half of this is genuine, it's the biggest corruption case in territorial history. It's all genuine. I took those documents from my father's personal safe, which is still theft, technically." He held up a hand as she started to protest. "But given the circumstances, I think we can work something out. I'll need to verify these documents, contact authorities in New York." The door burst open. The deputy stumbled in, blood running from his nose. "Marshal, we got company. 4 men, armed, demanding the woman." Morrison was already moving, pulling a shotgun from the rack on the wall. "How'd they find her so fast?" "Someone must have seen me arrive," Arabella said, her heart sinking. "Marshal, I don't want anyone hurt because of me." "Too late for that. Miss Fontaine, you're in federal custody now, and I don't take kindly to people threatening prisoners or witnesses." He tossed her a revolver from his desk drawer. "You know how to use this?" "I've learned." "Good. Stay behind me and shoot anyone who gets past." They could hear voices outside now, harsh and demanding. Through the window, Arabella glimpsed men positioning themselves across the street. Her worst fear realized. She'd brought violence to innocent people again. "Federal Marshal," Morrison bellowed from the doorway. "You men disperse now, or face charges of interfering with federal law." "Send out the woman, Marshal," came the reply. "She's a wanted fugitive. We're here to collect the bounty. All legal-like. She's in my custody pending investigation. Any bounty claims go through proper channels." A shot shattered the window, showering them with glass. Morrison cursed and returned fire with a shotgun, the boom deafening in the enclosed space. "They're trying to flank us," the deputy yelled from his position at the side window. Arabella saw movement in the alley beside the office. Without thinking, she aimed and fired, seeing a man duck back into cover. The revolver kicked harder than she expected, but her hands were steady. More shots erupted from multiple directions. Morrison fought with cool efficiency, directing the deputy's fire, making every shot count. But they were outnumbered and surrounded. "Is there a back way out?" Arabella asked. Leads to the livery stable. Morrison replied between shots. But they'll have it covered. A voice she recognized made her blood run cold. Miss Fontaine, this is Samuel Crenshaw, Judge Blackwood's personal secretary. You remember me, don't you? I was there the night your sister died. Rage flooded through her. Crenshaw. She remembered him now. A thin man with dead eyes who did Blackwood's dirtiest work. The marshal can't protect you. Crenshaw continued. But Judge Blackwood is still willing to be merciful. Come out now, return what you stole, and he'll let your cowboy live. You have my word. Your word is worthless, she shouted back. Just like your master's. Have it your way, boys, burn them out. Smoke began seeping under the door. They'd set fire to the boardwalk outside. Morrison cursed creatively. Can't stay here. We make for the back. Take our chances. They were preparing to move when new gunfire erupted outside, but not directed at them. Shouts of alarm, the thunder of hooves, and then a voice that made Arabella's knees weak with relief. Crenshaw, this is Eli McCrae. You want her. You go through me. Through the shattered window, she saw him, mounted on one of the mission horses, a rifle in each hand, riding straight into the group of attackers like an avenging angel. Behind him came Father Francisco's vaqueros, whooping and firing. The tide turned in seconds. Caught between the marshal's office and the charging riders. Blackwood's men scattered. Crenshaw tried to run, but didn't make it 10 feet before Eli's lasso dropped him to the dust. Morrison kicked open the door. Shotgun ready, but the fight was already over. Dead and wounded littered the street. The surviving attackers had their hands up, surrounded by grinning vaqueros. Eli dismounted and crossed to the office in long strides. His face was a mask of controlled fury until he saw Arabella. Then it crumbled into relief. She met him halfway, throwing herself into his arms. You little fool, he murmured against her hair. Did you really think I'd let you face this alone? How did you know? Father Francisco, he came to me at dawn, said you'd need help. These men were already riding to back us up. He pulled back to look at her, checking for injuries. Are you hurt? No, Eli, I'm sorry. He silenced her with a kiss, then turned to Morrison. Marshal, I believe you have some documents to review. This woman is under my protection, and I'll kill any man who tries to take her. Morrison studied them both, then smiled slightly. Mr. McCrae, I believe Miss Fontaine is about to become the federal government's star witness in a major corruption case. Protective custody can be arranged. He turned to his deputy. Get me the territorial judge, the honest one. We're going to need a lot of arrest warrants. Crenshaw, blood running from a split lip, laughed bitterly from where he knelt in the street. You think this changes anything? Judge Blackwood owns half of New York. He'll never see justice. Maybe not, Morrison said. But he'll see scandal, ruin, and federal investigation. Sometimes that's justice enough. He looked at Arabella. You'll need to testify. It could take months. I'll testify, she said firmly. To all of it. As the sun climbed higher, turning the desert sky brilliant blue, the federal machinery began to turn. Telegraph messages flew east. The wooden box of evidence was secured in Morrison's safe. Statements were taken. Plans were made. Through it all, Eli never left Arabella's side. When she finally told Morrison about Margaret's death, Eli held her hand. When she signed her statement with a shaking hand, he steadied it with his own. It's not over, she said that night, safe in the mission once more. Blackwood still has resources, influence. But now so do we, Eli reminded her. The federal government wants him bad. Morrison's already talking about witness protection, a new life somewhere far from here once the trials are done. A new life, she repeated, then took his hand and placed it on her belly. For all three of us. His eyes widened. 3. I told you in the desert, remember? Our child. Eli. That's why I had to try to end this. I couldn't bear the thought of raising our baby in fear. He pulled her close, his voice rough with emotion. No more running off alone. We face whatever comes together. Promise me. I promise, she whispered. No more secrets. No more running alone. Outside, the mission bells rang the evening prayer. Inside, two souls who had found each other in the wilderness began to plan for a future they could finally believe in. The road ahead would be long. Trials, testimony, the complete upheaval of their lives. But for tonight, they had each other, their unborn child, and the knowledge that Arabella had finally found the courage to drag her family's darkness into the light. It wasn't perfect justice. Margaret was still gone, and some of the guilty would escape punishment. But it was a beginning. And sometimes, Eli thought as he held the woman he loved, a beginning was all you needed. The Sangre de Cristo Mountains loomed dark against the star-filled sky as Eli and Arabella pushed their horses through the narrow pass. They'd been riding hard for 2 days, ever since word came that Judge Blackwood himself had arrived in the territory with a small army of hired guns. "The cave's just ahead," Eli called over his shoulder, guiding his mount around a fallen boulder. "We can rest there until dawn." Arabella didn't reply, focused on staying in the saddle despite the exhaustion that pulled at every muscle. Her pregnancy was showing now, 5 months along, making the hard riding even more difficult. But when Marshal Morrison had warned them that Blackwood had somehow secured their location, they'd had no choice but to run. The cave was more of a deep overhang in the cliff face, sheltered and defensible. Eli had used it before during his scouting days. He helped Arabella dismount, worry etched in every line of his face as he noted her pallor. "I'm fine," she insisted, though her legs trembled as she stood. "Just tired. You're pushing too hard. The baby is strong, like its father." She managed a weak smile. "How far to the Ute village?" "Half a day's ride, if we can avoid Blackwood's men." He unsaddled the horses while she sank gratefully onto a flat rock. "Chief O'Ray owes me a debt from years back. His people will shelter us." They made a cold camp, not daring to risk a fire that might be seen. Eli wrapped Arabella in all their blankets, then sat watch at the cave mouth, rifle across his knees. The night was quiet except for the distant howl of coyotes and the whisper of wind through pine. "I'm sorry," Arabella said softly from her makeshift bed. "This is all my fault. If I hadn't gone to Morrison—" "You did the right thing," Eli interrupted. "Those documents have already led to a dozen arrests back east. Your father's in federal custody. 3 judges have been removed from the bench. That's worth something. Worth our lives? Worth our child's life?" He moved to sit beside her, pulling her against his chest. "We're not dead yet, and I'll be damned if I let Blackwood or anyone else harm you or our baby." She was quiet for a moment, then spoke in a voice thick with unshed tears. "In Tucson, before you arrived, Crenshaw said something. He said he was there the night Margaret died. What if Blackwood was involved even then? What if this goes back further than I thought? Then we'll find out the truth," Eli promised. "But first, we survive. Justice comes second to keeping you and the baby safe." Dawn came gray and cold, with clouds building over the peaks that promised snow. They moved cautiously, Eli scouting ahead while Arabella followed with the horses. The trail wound higher into the mountains, through stands of aspen already golden with autumn. They were perhaps 2 hours from the Ute village when the ambush came. The first shot took Eli's hat off. He threw himself sideways, yanking Arabella from her horse as more bullets whined overhead. They tumbled into a ravine, landing hard among the rocks. "Stay down," Eli hissed, checking his rifle. Blood ran from a cut on his forehead where he'd hit a stone, but he ignored it. "McCrae," the voice echoed off the mountains. "We've got you surrounded. Send out the woman and we'll make your death quick." Eli counted muzzle flashes. At least 6 shooters, positioned on the ridges above them. Their ravine provided cover, but also trapped them. He looked at Arabella, saw the same realization in her eyes. "How much ammunition?" she asked, already checking the revolver he'd given her. "Not enough." He squeezed her hand. "But we'll make it count." The firefight that followed was fierce and desperate. Eli used every trick he knew, conserving ammunition, making them think he had more guns than he did. Arabella proved herself again, cool under fire despite the life growing inside her. But the math was against them. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and running low on bullets. When Eli took a graze across his ribs that left him gasping, Arabella knew they couldn't hold out much longer. That's when they heard it, a sound that made the attackers pause in confusion. War cries, echoing off the mountains like thunder. The Ute had come. Chief Oray's warriors descended on Blackwood's men like an avalanche, arrows and ancient rifles against modern weapons, but with the advantage of surprise and knowledge of the terrain. The hired guns, used to intimidating townsfolk and farmers, found themselves facing warriors who'd been fighting in these mountains for generations. Eli struggled to his feet, adding his fire to the battle. Within minutes, it was over. Those of Blackwood's men who could still ride were fleeing down the mountain. The rest would never leave it. Oray himself, a dignified man in his 60s with silver threading his black hair, rode up to the ravine. "McCrae," he said in accented English, "you still find trouble like a magnet finds iron." "Chief," Eli gasped, pressing a hand to his bleeding side, "your timing is, as always, perfect." The Ute village was a collection of teepees in a hidden valley, bisected by a clear mountain stream. Arabella found herself in the chief's own lodge, being tended by Chipeta, Oray's wife, who clucked over her like a mother hen. "Baby strong," Chipeta pronounced after examining her with gentle hands. "But mother needs rest. Too much riding, too much fear." Eli's wound proved more serious than he'd let on. The bullet had cracked a rib and left a deep furrow that required careful cleaning and stitching. He bore it stoically, but Arabella saw the pain in his eyes. "We can't stay long," he said that evening as they sat by the fire in the lodge provided for them. "Blackwood will regroup, maybe try to bring the army in." "The army won't attack Oray's people," Arabella said. "Not without cause. The chief has treaties, government recognition. Treaties have been broken before." She knew he was right. Their presence put the entire village at risk. But for now, for tonight, they were safe. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Marshal Morrison himself rode in with a small federal escort, his face grim beneath his wide hat. "Thought I might find you here," he said, dismounting stiffly. "McCrae, Miss Fontaine, we need to talk." In Oray's lodge, with the chief as witness, Morrison laid out the situation. "Judge Blackwood's lost his mind. He's killed 2 federal witnesses, burned down the courthouse in Tucson to destroy evidence. Washington sent a special prosecutor, and there's a company of cavalry riding in from Fort Union." "So it's over?" Arabella asked hopefully. "Far from it. Blackwood's holed up at the old Presidio San Agustin with maybe 30 men. He's claiming he's the victim of a conspiracy, that you're the real criminal. Some folks are listening." Morrison fixed them with a steady gaze. "I need you to testify, publicly, before this gets worse." The prosecutors set up a special hearing in neutral ground, Fort Defiance, military protection, federal jurisdiction. Eli shook his head. "It's a trap. Blackwood would never let her reach a witness stand. Maybe, but without her testimony, he might actually wiggle free. His lawyers are good, and he's spreading enough money around to buy doubt." Morrison turned to Arabella. "It's your choice, ma'am, but this is our chance to end it for good." Arabella's hand moved to her belly, feeling the flutter of movement there. Her child deserved a life free from fear, a chance to grow up without looking over their shoulder. "When?" 3 days. I'll escort you personally, along with a cavalry detachment." "No," Eli said flatly. "Absolutely not. Eli, you're 6 months pregnant. Arabella, you've been shot at, chased across the territory, living rough for weeks. Enough is enough." She turned to face him fully, taking his hands in hers. "And it will never be enough until this is finished. Don't you see? We can run forever, but Blackwood's shadow will always follow us. Our child will grow up in fear, never knowing if today's the day someone comes to collect an old bounty." Her voice grew stronger. "I won't let Margaret's death be for nothing. I won't let our child grow up the way I did, surrounded by lies and corruption." Chief Oray spoke for the first time. "The woman speaks wisdom." Sometimes, to have peace, we must first have war. My warriors will ride with you to this fort. Ensure you arrive safely." Eli looked around the lodge, at Morrison's determined face, at Ulray's calm certainty, and finally at Arabella's resolute expression. "Then we all go, and God help any man who tries to stop us." The journey to Fort Defiance took 2 days. Their party was impressive. 20 Ute warriors in full regalia, a dozen cavalry troopers, Marshal Morrison and his deputies, and in the center, Eli and Arabella. She rode in a wagon now, Eli beside her, neither willing to risk the baby with hard riding. They camped the first night beside Canondicelli, the ancient red walls glowing in the sunset. Arabella stood at the rim, looking down at the ruins of the old ones far below. "Civilizations rise and fall," she said softly. "But the truth remains, carved in stone." Eli wrapped his arms around her from behind, careful of her expanding belly. "Philosophical tonight? Thinking about legacy. What we leave behind. Margaret's legacy was the truth she died trying to reveal. Mine will be finally speaking it aloud. Ours," he corrected. "Our legacy. You're not alone in this anymore." She turned in his arms, reaching up to touch his face. "How did I get so lucky? To find you in that storm." "I'm the lucky one," he said, kissing her gently. "You brought me back to life. Arabella, before you, I was just existing, hiding from the world. You made me want to fight again, to believe in something beyond survival." That night, they made love in their tent with careful tenderness, aware it might be their last time. The baby moved between them, a reminder of the future they were fighting for. Fort Defiance sprawled across the desert like a brown toad, all adobe walls and wooden palisades. As their party approached, Arabella saw the gallows standing stark against the sky and shivered. Justice and death walked hand in hand in this harsh land. The hearing was set for the next morning in the fort's main hall. That night, confined to quarters for their protection. Eli paced like a caged wolf, while Arabella tried to review her testimony with the federal prosecutor, a thin man named Hartwell who seemed competent if nervous. "Just tell the truth," Hartwell kept saying. "Dates, names, specific incidents. The documents support your claims, but your testimony brings them to life." "And Blackwood? Will he be there?" Hartwell shifted uncomfortably. "He has the right to face his accuser." "But there will be guards." A commotion outside interrupted him. Shouts, running feet. Then Morrison burst in. "They're here, Blackwood and his men. They're demanding entry, claiming they're here for the hearing." Eli was already checking his weapons. "How many?" 20, maybe 25, all armed." Morrison looked grim. "The fort commander's in a bind. He can't refuse them entry without cause, but we all know they're not here for justice." Arabella finished. She stood, squaring her shoulders. "It doesn't matter. I'll testify tomorrow, come hell or high water." The night passed with tense watchfulness. Eli never left her side, dozing fitfully in a chair while she tried to rest. Dawn came too soon, bringing with it the moment of reckoning. The hall was packed. Soldiers, townspeople, newspaper correspondents from as far as Denver, and in the front row, like a spider in his web, sat Judge Theodore Blackwood. He was smaller than Arabella had remembered, but his presence filled the room with malevolence. His pale eyes found hers across the space, and his thin lips curved in what might have been a smile. "Don't look at him," Eli murmured, guiding her to the witness chair. "Look at me, or at Morrison, or at the flag, but don't give him the satisfaction of your fear." The prosecutor began with simple questions. Her name, her background, her relationship to her father. Then, step by step, he led her through the story, the embezzlement, the cover-ups, Margaret's suspicions and subsequent death, the forced engagement, her flight. Arabella spoke clearly, her voice growing stronger with each word. She told them about finding the documents, about the threats, the chase across the territory. When she described Margaret's death, tears ran down her cheeks, but her voice never wavered. "That's a very touching story, Miss Fontaine." Blackwood's lawyer, a smooth-talking man named Grimsby, rose for cross-examination. "But isn't it true that you're a wanted criminal? That you stole thousands from your father's bank?" "I took evidence of his crimes. Nothing more. Evidence you claim proves his guilt. How convenient that you, the accused thief, happen to have documents that shift blame to others." The questioning went on for hours, Grimsby trying every trick to discredit her. But Arabella held firm, and the documents spoke for themselves. Bank records, correspondence in Blackwood's own hand, proof of bribes and murder for hire. It was nearly noon when chaos erupted. One of Blackwood's men, positioned near a window, gave a shrill whistle. Suddenly, armed men were pouring through doors and windows. Soldiers scrambled for weapons as shots rang out. "Get her out!" Morrison roared, throwing himself between Arabella and the attackers. Eli didn't need to be told twice. He lifted Arabella from the witness chair and rushed toward the side door. Behind them, the hall exploded into violence. Uray's warriors, who'd refused to surrender their weapons at the gate, proved their worth as they battled alongside the soldiers. They made it to the courtyard before Blackwood himself intercepted them, flanked by two gunmen. The judge's cultured veneer had cracked, revealing the monster beneath. "Did you really think you could destroy me?" he snarled. "A worthless girl and her saddle-tramp lover? I've crushed better than you." "Maybe," Eli said, pushing Arabella behind him. But they didn't have the truth on their side. The gunfight that followed was brief but vicious. Eli, even wounded, was faster than Blackwood's men. 2 shots, 2 bodies falling. But Blackwood himself had drawn a hidden derringer, aiming not at Eli but at Arabella. She saw it happening as if in slow motion, the small gun rising, Blackwood's finger tightening on the trigger, Eli trying desperately to turn and shield her. The shot was impossibly loud in the enclosed courtyard, but it was Blackwood who staggered, looking down in shock at the spreading red stain on his chest. Behind him, Chipeta lowered an ancient rifle, her face impassive. "No one threatens mother and child in my presence," she said simply. Blackwood fell to his knees, then forward, his blood soaking into the dusty ground. With their leader dead, his remaining men quickly surrendered or fled. In the aftermath, as soldiers rounded up prisoners and tended wounded, Eli held Arabella close, both of them trembling with reaction. "It's over," she whispered, hardly daring to believe it. "The killing's over," Morrison corrected, limping over with a bloody cloth pressed to his arm. "The legal proceedings will take months, but with your testimony and Blackwood dead, the rest will fall like dominoes." He was right. Over the following weeks, as Arabella recovered at Fort Defiance, news came of arrests, trials, convictions. Her father, faced with overwhelming evidence, confessed to everything, including his role in Margaret's death. He would spend his remaining years in federal prison. "Do you hate me for destroying your family?" Arabella asked Eli one evening as they watched the sunset from the fort's walls. "They destroyed themselves," he said firmly. "You just held up a mirror to show the world what they really were." He rested his hand on her belly, feeling the strong movements within. "Besides, we're building a new family, a better one." She covered his hand with hers. "I love you, Eli McCrae, and I love you, Arabella soon-to-be McCrae," he said with a grin. "The chaplain's waiting, you know. Unless you've changed your mind about making an honest man of me." "Never," she said, pulling him down for a kiss. "You're stuck with me, Cowboy, forever." As the stars emerged in the desert sky, they walked hand in hand to the chapel, ready to begin their new life. Behind them lay months of fear and violence. Ahead stretched unknown trails and challenges, but they would face them together, bound by love, strengthened by truth, and carrying new life into a world they'd helped make a little more just. The frontier had tested them and found them worthy. Now it was time to build something lasting on the foundation they'd fought so hard to create. The contractions started just after midnight, pulling Arabella from restless sleep with a force that took her breath away. Outside their temporary quarters at Fort Defiance, a late autumn storm lashed against the windows, as if nature itself was marking this moment of transition. "Eli," she gasped, reaching for him in the darkness. He was instantly awake, a lifetime of vigilance serving him well. "Is it time?" "I think so." Another contraction rolled through her, stronger than the first. "The baby's coming." Within minutes, the fort's doctor was summoned, along with Chipeta, who had stayed nearby these final weeks of pregnancy. The Ute woman took one look at Arabella and nodded knowingly. "Baby comes with the storm," she said. "Strong spirit, like mother." The hours that followed blurred together in a haze of pain and determination. Eli never left her side, letting her grip his hand hard enough to leave bruises, murmuring encouragement when she faltered. The doctor, a competent man named Brennan, worked with calm efficiency while Chipeta provided traditional remedies that seemed to help. "You're doing fine, Doctor," Brennan assured her as dawn broke gray and wet outside. "The baby's positioned well, just a little longer." Arabella wanted to laugh at "a little longer." Time had lost all meaning in the rhythm of contractions. But then, suddenly, there was a shift, a change, and she knew. "Push now," Chipeta commanded. "Your daughter is ready to meet the world." "Daughter?" Eli's voice was wondering. "I know these things," Chipeta said with quiet certainty. She was right. As the storm began to clear, revealing a desert washed clean and new, Hope McCrae entered the world with a lusty cry that announced her intention to be heard. She had her mother's dark hair, and when she finally opened them, her father's steel-gray eyes. "She's perfect," Eli breathed, cradling the tiny bundle while Arabella recovered. "Look what we made. Love." Arabella, exhausted but euphoric, traced her daughter's delicate features with one finger. "Hope, it suits her. Born from darkness into light, like her mother," Eli said softly, leaning down to kiss Arabella's forehead. "The strongest woman I know." Marshal Morrison visited the next day, hat in hand, to offer congratulations and news. "The trials are moving forward faster than expected. Your father's testimony is damning. He's trying to reduce his sentence by giving up everyone involved." He paused, looking uncomfortable. "He's asked to see you." Arabella stiffened, her arms tightening around Hope. "No, I told him as much. But legally, I had to inform you." Morrison's expression softened. "There's other news, better news. The federal prosecutor says your testimony, combined with the evidence, will likely result in convictions for everyone involved. You've done it. Mrs. McCrae. You've brought them all down." Mrs. McCrae. The name still felt new. Wonderful. They'd married in the fort's chapel 3 months ago. A simple ceremony with Morrison and Chipeta as witnesses. No elaborate dress or society reception. Just two people pledging their lives to each other and the child they carried. "What will you do now?" Morrison asked. "The government's offer of protection and relocation still stands." Eli and Arabella exchanged looks. They'd discussed this endlessly in recent weeks. "We're going home," Eli said simply. "To New Mexico territory. I've got money saved. Enough to buy a small ranch near the Sangre de Cristos. Far enough from the past. Close enough to friends." He looked at Ure's people, who had become like family. "We want Hope to grow up knowing both worlds, the one we came from and the one we're building." Morrison nodded approval. "The paperwork will take a few weeks. You'll need new identities for complete safety." "No," Arabella interrupted. "No more hiding. We are Eli and Arabella McCrae, and this is our daughter Hope. Let anyone who has a problem with that come find us." Her green eyes flashed with the old fire. "I'm done running." The next weeks passed in a blur of legal documents, testimonies via written deposition, and learning the rhythms of new parenthood. Hope proved to be a baby of strong opinions, letting them know immediately when she was hungry, wet, or simply wanted to be held. "She gets that from you," Eli would say when Hope wailed at 3 a.m. "The stubborn streak is definitely yours," Arabella would counter, walking the floor with their daughter until she settled. One evening, as Arabella nursed Hope by lamplight, She found Eli staring out the window with an expression she recognized, the distant look of a man seeing ghosts. "What is it?" she asked softly. "I was thinking about paths," he said. "If I hadn't gone hunting that day, if you'd taken a different trail, if the storm hadn't hit just then." He turned to face her. "So many ways we could have missed each other." "But we didn't," she reminded him. "Maybe some things are meant to be." "A year ago, I didn't believe in meant to be. Didn't believe in much of anything except survival." He crossed to sit beside them, one finger gently stroking Hope's downy hair. "Now I believe in everything. Love, family, second chances, justice. You gave me all of that." "We gave each other," Arabella corrected. "I was just as lost as you, Eli, just as frozen. In my own way, we saved each other." The news came on a crisp November morning, carried by special courier. The trials were over. 23 convictions, including 3 judges, a territorial governor, and numerous banking officials. Her father had been sentenced to 25 years. The corruption ring was shattered. But the letter that mattered most came separately, in Hartwell's precise handwriting. "Mrs. McCrae, I thought you should know that during your father's testimony, he confessed to arranging your sister's death. He provided details that corroborate your account completely. While Margaret cannot receive earthly justice, her murder is now part of the official record. The truth you fought so hard to reveal is now undeniable. Your courage has inspired many. The reforms already beginning will prevent such corruption from taking root again. With deepest respect, James Hartwell, Federal Prosecutor." Arabella read the letter 3 times, then held it to the candle flame, watching Margaret's vindication turn to smoke and ash. "Rest now, little sister," she whispered. "It's finished." Their departure from Fort Defiance was bittersweet. The soldiers lined up to see them off, many having grown protective of the small family. Dr. Brennan provided detailed instructions for Hope's care. Morrison shook Eli's hand with genuine warmth, but it was the farewell with the Ute that brought tears. Chipeta had woven a traditional cradle board for Hope, decorated with symbols of protection and strength. O'Ray presented Eli with an eagle feather, a mark of honor rarely given to outsiders. "You will always have a place among our people," the chief said solemnly. "Your daughter carries our blessing. May she grow strong and wise." "We'll visit," Arabella promised, embracing Chipeta. Hope should know her second family. The journey to their new home took a week, traveling slowly with an infant. They followed the Rio Grande south, through valleys golden with autumn cottonwoods, past ancient pueblos and modern settlements. Hope traveled well, seeming to enjoy the motion of the wagon, often sleeping contentedly in her mother's arms. The ranch, when they finally reached it, was modest but perfect. A small adobe house with a well, good grazing land stretching to the foothills, and a view of the mountains that took Arabella's breath away. The previous owner, eager to try his luck in the California gold fields, had left it in good condition. "Home," Eli said simply, helping her down from the wagon. That first night in their own home, they spread blankets on the floor. Furniture would come later, and made a camp of sorts by the fireplace. Hope lay between them, making small sounds of contentment. "Are you happy?" Eli asked, studying Arabella's face in the firelight. "More than I ever thought possible," she answered honestly. "A year ago, I was running for my life, certain I'd never know peace again. Now," she gestured around the simple room, at their daughter, at him. "Now I have everything. No regrets. You could have gone back east after the trials, reclaimed your place in society. My place is here," she interrupted firmly. "With you, with Hope, with the life we're building. Let someone else have society. I'll take substance over show any day." They made love that night with quiet intensity, mindful of the baby sleeping nearby, celebrating not with wild passion but with deep tenderness. Every touch was a promise, every kiss a renewal of vows. The weeks that followed were filled with the work of building a life. Eli repaired fences and bought cattle from neighboring ranches. Arabella learned the rhythms of frontier housekeeping, so different from her pampered upbringing. Hope grew with startling speed, her gray eyes taking in everything with serious interest. Their first test came sooner than expected. Two men rode up one December morning, hard-faced and travel-worn. Eli met them in the yard, hand resting casually on his Colt. "Help you, gentlemen?" "Looking for someone," the larger one said. "Woman named Fontaine. Heard she might be in these parts." "No one by that name here," Eli said evenly. "Just me, my wife, and our baby." The man's eyes narrowed. "Mind if we talk to your wife?" "I do mind. Actually, she's feeding our daughter." Eli's voice hardened. "And I don't take kindly to strangers upsetting my family. You'd best move along." The men exchanged glances, clearly debating. Then Arabella appeared in the doorway, hope in her arms. She looked every inch the frontier wife in her simple dress and apron, but her chin was raised in that defiant angle Eli knew so well. "Is there a problem, husband?" she asked, her Eastern accent completely gone, replaced by a creditable Western drawl. The men studied her, but between the sun-darkened skin, the work-roughened hands, and the baby at her breast, she bore little resemblance to the pale society belle in the wanted posters. "No problem, ma'am," the smaller one said finally. "Just looking for someone. Sorry to bother you." They rode off, and Eli waited until they were out of sight before pulling Arabella close. "That was dangerous. That was necessary," she corrected. "I won't hide in my own home. Besides, did you see their faces? They were looking for Arabella Fontaine, scared rabbit and Eastern lady. They didn't see her because she doesn't exist anymore." She was right. As winter settled over the mountains, bringing snow and quiet isolation, the past seemed to fade like morning mist. They had challenges, a difficult calving season, a mountain cat that stalked their livestock, the endless work of frontier life, but they faced them together. Hope grew into a baby of remarkable determination, learning to crawl with a single-minded purpose, exploring every corner of her small world. Watching her, Arabella often thought of Margaret, wishing her sister could see this proof that life goes on, that love triumphs over loss. She would have adored being an aunt, she said one evening, as Hope pulled herself up on unsteady legs. "She is an aunt," Eli said quietly. "Just because she's not here doesn't mean she's not part of Hope's story. We'll tell our daughter about her brave Aunt Margaret, who loved truth more than safety." Spring came slowly to the high country, but when it arrived, it transformed everything. The desert bloomed with unexpected color, and their small ranch stirred to new life. Eli had bought more cattle, hired 2 hands to help with the work. Arabella had planted a kitchen garden, coaxing vegetables from the arid soil. On Hope's first birthday, they held a gathering. The neighboring ranchers came, bringing their families. Morrison rode down from Santa Fe, where he'd been promoted. Even Jake Martinez made the journey, bringing news from Colorado and a hand-carved toy horse for Hope. "You've done well," Jake said, looking around the thriving ranch. "This is a good life you've built." "It wasn't easy," Arabella admitted, bouncing Hope on her hip, "but the best things never are." As the sun set on that perfect day, painting the mountains in shades of rose and gold, Eli found Arabella standing at the edge of their property, looking out over the land they'd claimed through sweat and determination. "What are you thinking?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "That we made it," she said softly. "Through storm and desert, through bullets and courtrooms, through all of it. We made it, Eli." "Was there ever any doubt?" he teased, but his voice was thick with emotion. "So much doubt," she admitted. "But you never let me give up. You believed in us when I couldn't. And you gave me something to believe in," he countered. "Before you, I was just existing. You brought me back to life." Hope squirmed between them, reaching for her father with chubby arms. Eli took her, lifting her high until she squealed with delight. Watching them, Arabella felt her heart might burst with the fullness of it all. They walked back to the house together, their shadows long in the evening light. Behind them lay a trail marked by loss and pain, violence and fear. But they had emerged from that darkness into this, a life built on truth, sustained by love, and filled with hope. The past would always be part of their story. Margaret's memory, the scars they both carried, the knowledge of how quickly safety could turn to danger. But the past no longer defined them. They had written a new story, one of redemption and courage, of two lost souls who found each other in a storm and refused to let go. As night settled over the ranch and Hope slept peaceful in her cradle, Eli and Arabella stood on their porch, looking up at the brilliant stars of the western sky. "Forever?" Arabella asked, echoing a promise made in darker days. "Forever," Eli confirmed, sealing it with a kiss that tasted of home and hope and all the tomorrows yet to come. In the distance, a coyote called to its mate, and the answer came swift and sure across the desert. Even the wild things knew. Some bonds were meant to last. Some loves were worth any price. They had paid that price in blood and tears, in fear and flight. But standing there in the doorway of the home they'd built, with their daughter safe inside and their land stretching out before them, they knew the truth. It had all been worth it. The morning sun painted the mountains in shades of amber and rose as 4-year-old Hope McCrae ran through the wildflowers, her laughter carrying on the clean desert air from the porch of their ranch house. Arabella watched her daughter with a mixture of joy and wonder, still sometimes unable to believe this was their life now. "She's got your wild spirit," Eli said, joining her with 2 cups of coffee, the steam rising in the cool morning air. "And your fearlessness," Arabella countered, wincing as Hope attempted to climb a boulder twice her height. "Should we stop her?" "Let her climb. She'll learn her limits better that way." But Eli was already moving toward their daughter, ready to catch her if needed. 5 years had passed since they'd fled through these same mountains, hunted and desperate. Now the ranch had grown from a modest beginning into a thriving operation. They ran 300 head of cattle, employed 6 hands, and had added 2 rooms to the original adobe house. But more than the physical growth, it was the peace that marked the true change, the deep, settled peace of lives well lived. A rider appeared on the horizon, moving at an easy pace that suggested friend rather than foe. As he drew closer, Arabella recognized James Morrison, though his marshal's badge had been replaced by a federal judge's bearing. "Judge Morrison?" she called warmly. "What brings you to our valley?" Morrison dismounted, older now but still sharp-eyed. "Can't an old friend visit without raising suspicion? Though I do bring news from the world beyond your mountains." They sat in the shade of the cottonwoods Arabella had nursed through 5 dry summers, Hope playing nearby with the wooden animals Eli had carved for her. Morrison accepted a glass of Arabella's sun tea. She'd learned to brew it from Chipeta and studied them both. "You look well," he said finally. "Both of you. Content?" "We are," Eli confirmed. "But you didn't ride all this way to comment on our happiness." Morrison smiled, still direct as ever. "Very well. I've received a letter from New York, from an attorney representing your father's estate, Mrs. McCrae." Arabella stiffened. They'd received word 2 years ago that Charles Fontaine had died in prison, but she'd wanted nothing to do with whatever legacy he'd left behind. "I want nothing from him," she said flatly. "I understand, but this isn't about money or property." Morrison pulled out an envelope, aged and yellowed. "This was found in his effects, with instructions to deliver it to you upon his death. It's not from him, it's from your sister." The world seemed to tilt. Arabella's hands trembled as she took the envelope, seeing Margaret's familiar handwriting. "For Bella, when the time is right." "I'll give you privacy," Morrison said. But Arabella caught his sleeve. "No, stay. You've been part of this from the beginning. You should hear how it ends." With Eli's steadying presence beside her, she opened the letter. "Dearest Bella, if you are reading this, then Father has finally faced judgment, and you are free. I write this in haste and in secret, knowing what I must do tonight. I've discovered Father's crimes, not just the theft, but the murders, the bribes, the lives destroyed for profit. I have proof hidden in my music box, the one with the dancing ballerina you gave me for my 10th birthday. I plan to take it to the authorities tomorrow, but Father knows I know. I saw it in his eyes at dinner. If something happens to me tonight, know that it was not an accident. Know that I chose to stand for truth, as you always taught me to do. You were the best sister anyone could ask for. You protected me as long as you could, but some battles must be fought alone. If I die, it will not be your fault. It will be my choice. My stand against the darkness in our house. Live, Bella. Live freely and fully. Find love. Have children. Build a life filled with the light that was stolen from our childhood. And sometimes, when you see the stars, think of me. I'll be watching, proud of the woman I always knew you would become. All my love. Margaret P. S. The servants know the truth. Thomas saw Father leave my room that night. If you need testimony, find him. Asterisk. Arabella read the letter twice, tears streaming down her face. Then she handed it to Eli, who read it aloud for Morrison's benefit. When he finished, silence settled over them like a blanket. She knew, Arabella whispered. She knew what might happen, and she stood up anyway. She was only 12, and she was braver than all of us. The music box, Morrison said gently. Was it ever found? Destroyed in the fire. We assumed. Arabella wiped her eyes. But Thomas, Father's valet, is he still alive? I can find out, Morrison promised. Though after all this time, it doesn't matter, Arabella said with sudden clarity. Not anymore. Margaret's letter is vindication enough. She chose to fight, knowing the cost. That's her true legacy. Hope had wandered over, drawn by her mother's tears. Mama sad? She asked, climbing into Arabella's lap with the natural empathy children possess. No, sweetheart, Arabella said, holding her daughter close. Mama's heart is full. Sometimes that makes tears too. That evening, after Morrison had ridden on and Hope was asleep, Arabella and Eli walked to the small hill behind their house. It was where they'd buried the wooden box of evidence 3 years ago, finally laying the past to rest. Now Arabella knelt and placed Margaret's letter beneath a cairn of stones she built with careful hands. Your aunt was a warrior, she said softly. 12 years old and willing to face evil to protect others. We'll tell your story to Hope when she's older. How courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing what's right despite the fear. Eli helped her to her feet, and they stood together as the sunset painted the sky in brilliant strokes. She would be proud of you, he said, of the life you've built, the mother you've become. I hope so. Arabella leaned into his strength. Some days I still can't believe we made it, that we're here, alive, together, free. Believe it, Eli said firmly. We earned every bit of this happiness. As they walked back to the house, a familiar sound made them pause. Horses, approaching fast. Once, that sound would have sent them running. Now Eli simply checked the revolver at his hip and moved to meet the riders. But the tension eased as they recognized the lead figure, Ure, older now but still commanding, leading a small party of Ute, including Chipeta. My friends, the chief called. We come with the news and a request. They welcomed the visitors with food and drink, Hope delighting in the attention from Chipeta, who had delivered her into the world. As they gathered around the fire that night, Ore explained their presence. The government pushes us to smaller lands, always smaller, he said. But we have negotiated a school, a place where our children can learn the new ways while keeping the old. We need teachers. He looked at Arabella. You could teach them to read and write, help them navigate the world that's coming. Arabella felt something stir in her chest, purpose beyond her own family's survival. I would be honored, she said, though I'd need to learn as much as I teach. That is wisdom, Chipeta said approvingly. The best teachers are eternal students. They spent 3 days planning. The school would be a 2-day ride from the ranch, allowing Arabella to spend weeks there while Eli managed the ranch, then return home. Hope could come when she was older, learning from both worlds. You don't mind? Arabella asked Eli privately. It means time apart. You were meant for more than just hiding in this valley. He said, I've watched you teach hope, seen how you light up when sharing knowledge. This is right. And you? Will you be lonely? He pulled her close. I survived years of loneliness before you. I can handle a few weeks knowing you're coming home to me. Besides, he grinned. It'll give me time to finish that addition to the house. Hope needs a proper room, and maybe... He trailed off, hand moving to her belly. Arabella caught his hand, pressed it flat against her. Maybe a nursery, too. I wasn't sure, but now, I think Hope will have a sibling by spring. The joy on his face was answer enough. The school opened that autumn. A simple adobe building where Ute children gathered to learn letters and numbers alongside their traditional teachings. Arabella threw herself into the work with passion, developing methods to bridge two languages, two ways of seeing the world. Hope often accompanied her, playing with the other children, absorbing languages and customs with the ease of the young, watching her daughter move seamlessly between worlds. Arabella thought of barriers broken, of futures where understanding might replace fear. The new baby arrived with the spring floods, a boy they named Samuel James, after both their fathers, the good and the bad, acknowledging that people were complicated and even flawed men could contribute to a legacy of strength. He had Arabella's green eyes and Eli's stubborn chin, and Hope immediately declared herself his protector. Like Aunt Margaret protected you, she asked one day, old enough now to understand the stories. Yes, Arabella said, smoothing her daughter's dark hair. Exactly like that. We protect those we love, and we stand for what's right, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard, Eli added, joining them on the porch where Arabella rocked Samuel. That's when it matters most. As if to test those words, a letter arrived the next week that shook their peaceful world. It was from Hartwell, the federal prosecutor, now retired. Asterisk, Mrs. McCrae, I thought you should know that Thomas Brennan, your father's former valet, has come forward. He's dying and wants to clear his conscience. He's prepared to give a sworn statement about the night of your sister's death, confirming what you always knew. Additionally, investigation into Judge Blackwood's papers has revealed a wider conspiracy involving your sister. She had indeed gathered evidence and had contacted a journalist. Her death was ordered by Blackwood himself, with your father's consent. I know this changes nothing practically. The guilty are dead or imprisoned. But I thought you deserved to know that official history will now record Margaret Fontaine as a murder victim who died trying to expose corruption. Not a careless child who knocked over a candle. Truth may come slowly, but it does come. With regards, James Hartwell. Arabella read the letter to Eli that night, after the children were asleep. She's vindicated, she said. Officially, her name will be cleared in all the records. How do you feel about that? She considered. Grateful. Not for me. I never doubted her. But for Hope and Samuel. When they're older and curious about their family history, they'll find truth, not lies. They'll know they come from courage. That winter, on what would have been Margaret's 25th birthday, Arabella did something she'd been considering for years. Using some of the legitimate inheritance that had finally been released to her, money earned before her father's crimes, she established the Margaret Fontaine Foundation for the protection of vulnerable children. It's what she would have wanted, she explained to Eli as they signed the papers, to help other children who have no one to speak for them. The foundation started small, funding an orphanage in Santa Fe, providing education for children who'd lost their parents to the harsh realities of frontier life. But it grew, as truth tends to do when planted in good soil. Years passed in the rhythm of seasons. The ranch prospered, the school thrived, the foundation expanded. Hope grew tall and strong, with her mother's fierce spirit and her father's steady courage. Samuel proved to be a gentle soul with a gift for healing. He could calm the wildest horse and had an instinct for medicinal herbs that Chipeta nurtured. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Eli surprised Arabella with a journey, not fleeing this time, but traveling for pleasure. They visited San Francisco, where she saw the ocean for the first time since leaving New York. They stood on the shore, waves lapping at their feet, and marveled at how far they'd come. "Any regrets?" Eli asked, as he had that first night in their home. "Only one," Arabella said. "That Margaret couldn't see this, couldn't meet her niece and nephew, couldn't see what her courage made possible. She sees," Eli said with quiet certainty. "Every time Hope stands up to a bully, every time Samuel tends something broken, every time a child finds safety through the foundation, she sees." They returned home to find their valley covered in wildflowers, a rare, perfect spring that painted the desert in impossible colors. Hope ran to meet them, now 9 and full of stories about running the ranch with the foreman. Samuel, 7 and serious, presented his mother with a bouquet of flowers he'd grown himself. That evening, as they sat together on the porch, Eli whittling, Arabella reading aloud, the children playing at their feet, a sense of completion settled over them. Not ending, but fullness. The circle had closed. The debts were paid. The truth was told. "Mama," Hope said suddenly, "will you tell us the story again, about how you and Papa met?" Arabella smiled, setting aside her book. It was their favorite story, told so many times it had taken on the polish of legend. But that was how family histories were made, in the telling and retelling, in the passing down of truth wrapped in love. "It was a dark and stormy night," she began, and Eli reached over to take her hand. "The snow was falling so thick you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. I was lost, injured, certain I would die in those mountains. And then Papa found you," Samuel supplied eagerly. "And then your Papa found me," Arabella confirmed. "Half frozen himself. But he stopped to save a stranger. He carried me through the storm to safety. Because that's what good people do," Hope added, having internalized the lesson. "They help, even when it's dangerous. Especially when it's dangerous," Eli said, echoing his words from years before. As the story unfolded, the flight across the desert, the standoff in the canyon, the trial that brought down an empire of corruption, the children listened with rapt attention despite knowing every word. This was their heritage, their origin story, the foundation upon which their lives were built. When it was finished and the children were in bed, Arabella and Eli remained on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the clear desert sky. The same stars that had witnessed their desperate flight now looked down on their peace. "Thank you," Arabella said suddenly. "For what?" "For stopping in that storm, for not riding past, for believing a stranger's wild story, for fighting beside me, for this life." She gestured at their home, their land, their sleeping children. "For all of it, thank you," he replied. "For being worth stopping for trusting a rough stranger with your life, for showing me I had more to offer than solitude, for our children, for teaching me that love is the greatest courage of all." They sat in comfortable silence, no longer needing words after all these years. Inside, Hope murmured in her sleep, probably dreaming of adventures. Samuel's window showed the soft glow of the nightlight he still needed. Some fears took time to conquer, and that was okay. A coyote called in the distance, its mate answering from another ridge. The sound that had once meant danger now simply meant home, wild things living free, calling to their loved ones across the darkness. Arabella thought of Margaret, forever 12 in memory but somehow present in Hope's defiant chin, in Samuel's gentle heart, in every choice to stand for truth over comfort. She thought of all the children who would find safety through the foundation, all the Ute students who would navigate 2 worlds thanks to the school, all the lives touched by their journey from darkness to light. "We did it," she whispered, not to Eli but to the night, to Margaret, to the girl she'd been who'd run terrified into a killing storm. "We did it," Eli agreed, understanding as always. "We built something good from all that pain." As if in answer, a shooting star blazed across the heavens, brief but brilliant, leaving a trail of light in its wake, like Margaret's life, like their flight through the desert, like every moment of courage that changes the world in ways both small and profound. They went inside together, checking on their children one more time before bed. In the doorway of Hope's room, Arabella paused. On the nightstand sat a music box Eli had bought in San Francisco, a dancing ballerina that spun to a tinkling melody. Hope had placed Margaret's picture next to it, the only image Arabella had saved from her past. "Good night, Aunt Margaret." Hope had taken to saying, "Thank you for being brave. Thank you for being brave." It was the heart of their story, the thread that connected past to present to future. Bravery not as the absence of fear, but as love in action despite the terror. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. The ranch needed tending. The school had a new term starting. The foundation required attention. But tonight, in this house built by love and defended by courage, all was well. Arabella slipped into bed beside Eli, fitting against him with the ease of long practice. Outside, the desert wind sang through the cottonwoods, and somewhere in the darkness, new life stirred. Seeds planted by wildflowers, preparing for another spring. "Forever?" she asked. "Their old ritual." "Forever and a day," he replied, adding to their promise as they'd added to their life, constantly growing, constantly choosing each other. And in the vast silence of the western night, with their children safe and their love secured, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The storm that had brought them together was long past. What remained was the life they'd built in its wake, strong as adobe walls, deep as mountain roots, enduring as the stones that marked a young girl's courage and the love that made all things possible. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I hope Eli and Arabella's journey touched your heart as much as it touched mine while sharing it. I'm curious, where in the world are you listening to this tale of courage and redemption? Please leave a comment below and let me know. Don't forget to subscribe to the From Wild West channel for more epic stories of love, adventure, and triumph in the American frontier. Share your thoughts about Eli and Arabella's story. What moment moved you the most? Your feedback means everything, and I love connecting with fellow Western romance enthusiasts from around the globe. Until our next adventure, keep riding toward the sunset. Partners.